Welcome to the pre-recording of the Old Didsbury Airport Area Structure Plan Open House. I am Margareta Bloom, the Director for Planning and Development Services for Mountain View County, and I will be one of the presenters. During this presentation, we will share an overview of the drafted Old Didsbury Airport Area Structure Plan. We thank you in advance for your time to participate and contribute to this review process. Before we start the presentation, here are a few introductions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rhianne Pohl, Planning Technician with Mountain View County, and I've been working with the steering committee throughout this ASP review process.
Hello, this is Glenn Bradley. Most people know me as Bruno. I'm the chair for the Aviation Advisory Committee and Steering Committee for this area structure plan review. I would also like to mention the other members of the steering committee who have all been working on the draft area structure plan. Jim Smith, Thomas, Mike Kennedy, Dom Bell, Naram Prasad, Angela Albers, Division 5 Councillor Reeve, and Alan Miller, Division 3 Councillor, who will also participate in this pre-recording.
Thank you, Bruno, for introducing the steering committee members. The in-person open house for the ASP review is on January 16th between 6 and 8 p.m. at the Mountain View County Administrative Building, located next to the Old Didsbury Airport. The same information in this pre-recording will be shared at the open house. Staff and steering committee members will be available to hear your thoughts and answer your questions. At the end of the presentation, we will remind you of the date and the time.
To make the best use of your time, we'd like to note the following. The presentation will first set the stage by explaining what an ASP is and why it's important to review the plan. We'll review the steps of adopting an ASP and where we currently are in the process. Then we'll review the key changes to the ASP and look over some of the updated maps that have helped guide some of the proposed policies. We will share the proposed expansion of the area structure plan boundaries. We will also look over some of the rules for future development of the airport, and at the conclusion, we'll share next steps for this review process. If you have any questions about the presentation or any of the information we're providing, please don't hesitate to contact myself. You'll see on this slide my email and telephone contact information. I'll hand it over to Councillor Miller now, who will review with you what an area structure plan is and why it's important.
This is Alan Miller, Division 3 Councillor for Mountain View County and also one of the members of the Aviation Advisory Committee and Steering Committee for this area structure plan review. An ASP is a policy document that is used by the county when evaluating planning and development applications within a specific area. If you have land within an ASP, you will want to be familiar with the document. ASPs are approved by council, and to keep these documents up to date, they are reviewed from time to time. If you are listening to this presentation, you will have an interest in the area near to the Old Didsbury Airport, perhaps maybe as a hangar owner within the airport, or as an agricultural producer, a county residential landowner, and receive notice that your land is proposed to be included in an ASP. The current Old Didsbury ASP was adopted in 2006 and is 18 years old. The proposed draft ASP considers known limitations associated with the airport and will guide future redesignation, subdivision, and development within the ASP boundaries. The intention of an ASP is to allow for future airport growth while also ensuring the safety of airport operations and aircraft that maneuver surrounding the airport, and only includes surrounding lands within the ASP boundaries that are absolutely necessary. The proposed plan seeks to maintain, to the greater extent possible, the ability to redesignate, subdivide, and develop, with some limitations for development within specific requirements. The policy proposed are intended to guide future land use within the next 10 to 15 years. Rhianne will briefly summarize where we are in the ASP review process.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. County Council approved the Old Didsbury Airport ASP review as part of the 2023 budget, and the first steering committee meeting was held in March 2023. Stage 1 of the ASP review process included reviewing key topics that needed to be considered for the draft ASP, as well as research of federal aviation regulations. We specifically looked at Transport Canada's document, Land Use in the Vicinity of Aerodromes, as this publication provides specific policy guidance for protecting aerodromes. Key areas were identified, and the steering committee directed administration on appropriate next steps. Stage 2 of the process outlined potential policies that could be included in the draft ASP. Updated maps were made that help guide how policies could be drafted. Various ASP plan boundaries were also considered. The draft ASP was accepted by the steering committee during the November 2023 meeting and is being shared with you in this presentation. The draft has been also posted on the county's website. We are currently in stage 3 of the process and are seeking public feedback. Stage 4 will take this feedback from the open house, which will then be presented to the steering committee so that they can evaluate if further changes are needed to the draft ASP. The final step will be to recommend to council to consider the new ASP and a formal process that will include a public hearing. Now, Margaretta will share with you the mapping within the current ASP and then the newly updated maps, which have helped guide some of the policies within the draft ASP. The old Didsbury Airport is technically an aerodrome, so we may use both terms throughout the presentation.
This map is the current height limitation map from the land use bylaw that was developed for the ASP when it was originally adopted in 2006. The rules for development throughout the county are contained within the land use bylaw and includes development in proximity to aerodromes. The steering committee agreed to update this map as part of the ASP review based on the most recent information from Transport Canada and from the airport. This is the updated height limitation map. The intent of this map is to show the allowable height of development that can occur along the takeoff and landing areas of the airport runways, the main runway as well as the secondary runway. You will notice that as you move further away from the runways, distance to the ground extends upward and represents the maximum height potential development could be built to. Because there is a potential to expand the runway by 206 meters or 675 feet in the future, this map is based on the expanded runway to ensure that no future development would impede aircraft from taking off or landing should the runway be extended in the future. Later in this presentation, we will review the policies that apply to areas within the height limitation areas. This slide shows the height limitation and outer surface map. According to Transport Canada's land use in the vicinity of aerodromes, an outer surface shall be established for the protection of aircraft conducting a circling maneuver or maneuvering around the aerodrome and is to extend to a horizontal distance of at least 4,000 meters from the aerodrome's reference point and 45 meters vertically. The outer surface is new to our mapping for this airport, and later in the presentation, you will hear how certain policies are directed to areas within the outer surface area. This slide shows the footprint of the outer surface map in relation to other policy areas within the county's statutory plans. The intent of this map is to help illustrate the area where aircraft may be flying in the vicinity of the airport. You will notice that most of the outer surface area is over agricultural land, although the southern edge touches the outskirts of the town of Didsbury, where there are special policy areas guided by the intermunicipal development plan policy document between the town and the county. You will also notice this part of the county is within the policy area called the Agricultural Preservation Area of the Municipal Development Plan. I will pass it over now to Rianne, who will go over the remaining maps that were created for the ASP review.
This slide shows the current noise exposure projection map. This map was created back in 2006 when the original ASP was adopted and illustrates the level of noise that is generated from airport operations. The process of developing this original map reflected previous standards for calculating noise and needed to be updated to reflect the current methods for estimating noise exposure surrounding the airport, based on how the airport is currently being used and projections for the future. Through the steering committee's direction, HM Aero was engaged to create an updated noise exposure projection map using current methods for estimating noise exposure. You can see the various contours that radiate from the airport's runways, each representing a different decibel reading. This system factors the subjective reaction of the human ear to aircraft noise based on the type of aircraft, frequency of takeoffs and landings, duration of noise, and other factors. This map has also been based on the assumption of an extended runway should that occur in the future. You'll notice in the table that comes from Transport Canada's land use in the vicinity of aerodromes, the predicted response for different decibel levels represented by the contour lines within the map. Noise exposure levels between 30 to 40 have the potential to cause greater disturbances, while levels below 30 can be more easily managed. Shortly, we'll review some of the policies that have been developed as a result of the information provided on this map. This map on this slide combines the data from the height limitations, noise exposure projection, and outer surface into one map. This helped guide and helped inform how the boundaries of the ASP could be configured. Councillor Miller will now go over how the proposed area structure plan boundaries were configured.
With the information provided through the new mapping that was created for this ASP review, the steering committee considered various configurations to expand the existing ASP boundaries. The red areas shown on this map show the quarter sections that are proposed to be included within the expanded ASP boundary. This is an increase from the current 2 quarter sections to 31 quarter sections. This particular configuration was selected as it limited the number of quarter sections to only those that would be included within the height limitation and the noise exposure forecast areas. This map, which also includes the outer surface area that surrounds the airport, would be included in the ASP and called the Aerodrome Protection Zone Overlay. Potential future applications for new development, subdivision, or changes of land use within the Aerodrome Protection Zone Overlay would require additional considerations to ensure that they do not impede the safe operation of the airport as well as the aircraft safety. Margaretta will now review the various policies proposed and how the ASP will guide future applications for landowners within the ASP area.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. This slide reviews the general policies that would apply to all lands within both the ASP boundaries, shown in red, as well as the lands within the outer surface area. The intent of these policies are to ensure that new applications for development, subdivision, or change in land use do not create additional risk for aircraft operations, ensure the safety of maneuvering aircraft, and do not impede the ability of the airport to expand in the future. As outlined by Councillor Miller, Figure 6, Aerodrome Protection Zone Overlay, would be used to guide future applications. When applications are submitted for consideration, they will be evaluated first against the policies of the Municipal Development Plan, which is a policy document that provides rules for all areas within Mountain View County. It should be noted that one of the goals of the MDP is to protect good agricultural land. One of the ways the MDP strives to do this is by limiting the number of subdivisions that can be considered in areas that have better agricultural soils. Because the land surrounding the airport contains some of the better soils in the county, only a maximum of 1 subdivision from a quarter section is supported under the current MDP policies. Within the actual ASP boundaries, shown in red on the map, the old Didsbury Airport ASP policies would also apply. Then, finally, the land use bylaw provides more specific rules for development of lands throughout the county, and contains a specific section on development of lands within the vicinity of an aerodrome and provide rules for all of the aerodromes within the county. This next slides look more closely at the proposed policies that would apply to areas within the aerodrome protection zone overlay. Agricultural land uses would be encouraged to continue. However, specific uses that have the potential to create additional hazards, such as dust or emissions that can create significant visual impairments for aircraft or attract wildlife, such as birds, will not be supported. Non-agricultural uses may be considered if they are compatible with the airport. Proposals for new development or land use changes may be referred to Transport Canada or NAV Canada. The ASP lists a number of considerations that new applications would be evaluated against, such as the potential for discharge, toxic emissions, the potential for dust, smoke, steam, or other visual impairments, the potential for fire or explosive hazards, the requirement for lighting, and the height of any proposed structures. Essentially, new development or land use changes must demonstrate their compatibility with the safe operations of the airport and provide specific considerations. Some forms of development, such as communication towers or commercial renewable energy projects, are not under county jurisdiction. However, the development permit would not be supported by the county if they interfere with the safe operations of the airport or impact airport maneuvering. Although the Natural Resource Conservation Board, NRCB, is responsible for decisions on confined feeding operations, a policy will not support new confined feeding operations within the ASP. This next slide looks at specifically how the proposed ASP's policies will impact landowners who would like to consider subdivision of their land, breaking down the policies into 3 specific areas of the aerodrome protection zone overlay. The left portion of the slide shows the subdivision policies for lands that are within the height limitations and noise exposure forecast areas, highlighted in red. The proposed policies of the ASP intend to limit subdivision within these areas to only the first parcel out as an agricultural subdivision or a farmstead removal. No country residential subdivisions will be supported if any part of the country residential subdivision is proposed within any part of the height limitation and noise exposure forecast areas. As agriculture and farm residences have coexisted with the airport since around 1982, it is proposed that these types of land uses could be considered for subdivision. The limitation that no part of any new country residential parcel should be within these areas are to reduce land use conflicts. The middle portion of the slide shows the lands within the proposed ASP boundaries, but do not include the lands that are impacted by the height limitation and noise exposure forecast areas, and are highlighted in red. Within these lands, first parcel out subdivisions can be considered for either agricultural subdivision, farmstead removal, or country residential subdivision. The right portion of the slide shows the areas are outlined in the proposed ASP plan area, but that are within the outer surface areas surrounding the airport. Subdivision potential for these lands would be evaluated against the agricultural policies of the municipal development plan, as long as they do not create any additional challenges for airport operations or maneuvering aircraft.
This mapping was drafted with the original ASP and is not intended to change. The map on the left side shows the proposed concept plan for the airport and highlights the various areas within the airport's boundaries. Airside lots, shown in light blue, are airport lots that have direct access to taxiways and the runways and are supposed to be used for aviation-related activities only. These lots are the ones where you'll typically find hangars for housing aircraft. Groundside lots, on the other hand, are shown in brown and would not have direct access to a taxiway or runway. Currently, there are no groundside lots at the airport. As the airport grows, this concept will be used to guide where future airside and groundside lots can be located. The little map on the right side of the slide shows the future phasing of the airport. Currently, only phase 1 of the airport has been developed. The intent is to further develop towards the west in phases 2 and 3, and then eventually in phase 4 will be developed to the north of the runway. The ASP provides policies to help guide the future development of the airport and are highlighted on this slide. The concept plan and proposed policies will help guide how future lots will be configured, how open spaces and pathways will be developed within airport lands, and the design criteria required for airport lot owners. Future phasing and lot design will be guided by market demand when the needs determined. Servicing of lots will be on site as no municipal water or municipal wastewater is available. Part of the ASP review process needed to consider the permitted and discretionary uses that are allowed within the current airport district zoning, which is listed within the county's land use bylaw. Bruno will now review the proposed changes to these uses within the land use bylaw that will also guide potential future development within the aerodromes of Mountain View County.
The land use bylaw outlines the various zoning districts that exist throughout Mountain View County. Part of the ASP review needed to consider the permitted and discretionary uses that are allowed within the airport district zoning. This slide reviews the proposed changes in uses that can be considered within the airport district. You can see that the table is broken down accordingly to whether the use is proposed within an airside or groundside lot. Uses that are shown in black currently exist in the airport zoning and is not intended to change. Uses that are shown as blue are proposed to be added to the district, while the uses shown crossed out in red are proposed to be removed. If you are interested in seeing the full description of these uses, you can click on the use and it will bring you to a definitions page with full description. The steering committee carefully considered each use and whether they would be compatible with the airport or whether they would cause potential challenges. Although the process to amend the land use bylaw is separate from the ASP review, it is important for the Olds Didsbury Airport Steering Committee to provide recommendations about the rules for the airport district zoning as part of the ASP review. I will now let Margaretta go into a bit more detail about the proposed changes that being made to the land use bylaws.
Thank you, Bruno. This slide shows the general guidance for new development on lands within the outer surface area that surrounds the Olds Didsbury Airport. Basically, it outlines the general provisions, which were previously highlighted within the ASP policies. New applications for development or land use changes may be referred to the operator of the airport, to Transport Canada, or to NAV Canada. Also, applications will be evaluated against a set of criteria such as potential for the emissions of visual impairments such as steam, dust or smoke, the potential for radiation or interference, utilization of radio frequencies that can interfere with the airport equipment, the use of lighting, and anything that may result in negative impact to airport operations or maneuvering aircraft. The next two slides show some of the additional rules for development within the specific areas of the Aerodrome Protection Zone overlay. The slide shows the policies that would apply to any of the areas within the height limitations. Should new development be proposed within these areas, additional information would need to be provided to outline the height of any proposed structures to ensure they do not penetrate the maximum height as outlined in the height restriction map. It may also be necessary to provide copies of the approvals from any provincial or federal regulated bodies and information about any clearance lights that may be required. This slide reviews policies for new residential development within the noise exposure projection areas. What is being proposed is that no new residential subdivision or new dwellings shall be supported in between the areas of the noise exposure projection contours of 30 and 40, between the red and the green contours. Construction of new dwellings can be considered within the areas that have noise exposure projection of 25 to 30. That is between the green and the purple contours. However, the applicant will need to provide information about how the dwelling will include acoustic insulation in its design according to the National Building Code, Alberta edition.
This concludes our presentation for the proposed changes that are being made to the Olds Didsbury Airport ASP. We look forward to seeing anyone who would like further information at the open house on January 16th, 2024 at the county office. On the first and last pages of the presentation, there is a web link or QR code that will bring you to the Mountain View County's webpage. This is where you can find updates on this ASP review, as well as comment sheet, where you can submit information that the steering committee can review, part of this review process. Thank you and goodbye.